It was about 11 o'clock at night when I left Johnny's house. He doesn't really live too far away from me. Not really. It's only about a 20-minute walk or so. Anyway, Johnny, Sarah, and I all spent the day hanging out at Johnny's house. I can't exactly remember what we were doing. Odds are we were watching a movie or something to that extent. Either way, that doesn't really matter. At least not to this story. I was walking home, guided by the lit street lamps against the light of the moon. Truth be told, I'm a very anxious person, and whenever I left home from Johnny's before, I always feared the worst. But nothing ever happened. I always got home safe, and not even a hair on my head ever got touched. But this night made me even more anxious than I already was. As I was walking home, the streets were silent. Not even one car in sight. On this night, you could hear the sound of the wind as it brushed by. You could hear the sound of each footstep as your feet hit the ground. Honestly, the silence was kind of calming. It was relaxing, and I got lost in my own head. I continued walking, and with a grin on my face, I thought of how lucky I was to have such great friends. I continued like this for a good while until something else broke the silence. I heard the sound of footsteps. Not mine, mind you. These were heavier. I took a glance around, and from behind me, I saw someone else walking in my direction. They were a bit far, so I couldn't really make out what they looked like, though I did pick up on a few details. They were tall, but a little on the heavier side, and had an unkempt beard. I really wasn't worried, as it was night. People had just gotten out of their late night shifts. Others just enjoy a good late night walk. I continued walking, but given the utter silence and the man's heavy steps, I found myself unable to drift back into my zen-like state from earlier. My walk back home stayed like this for a few blocks, until something changed. The other pair of footsteps suddenly got louder. I turned around, and to my shock, the man was still there. At this point, my anxiety kicked in again, and the first thought that crossed my mind was, am I being followed? Unsure if the man was actually stalking me, or he just happened to be walking in the same direction as me, I decided to resort to an old tactic. One I read on the internet, of course. It's a fairly simple one too. All you have to do to see if someone is following you is take 4 lefts. If the person is still there, then they're following you. And so, I strayed from my path and took the 4 lefts. As I did, I also quickened my pace. I turned around yet again, and to my horror, the man was still there. By now, my heart was beating twice as fast, and I started to panic. I've never been in this kind of situation, so I started to freak out. It became hard to breathe, and I started to slow down, unable to move faster as I felt my legs getting weaker. I've never been in a situation where I felt more vulnerable. All that aside, I kept moving forward. I knew if I just got home, everything would be okay. I kept moving, one step at a time, just trying to stay alive. Amidst my heavy breathing, I didn't even realize that the footsteps behind me were louder. If you want an estimate, it sounded like he was no further than 15 feet away. For reference sake, I should mention that between Johnny's house and mine, there is a huge cross street that kind of divides the city in which we live in. And the stoplight on that street is notorious for being incredibly slow. And as luck would have it, that stoplight was on red when I got there. I started to walk faster. and when I got to the stoplight, it changed to orange. I was standing there like a sitting duck, waiting for the light to turn green. In retrospect, I should have just ran across. There were no cars crossing. But I was petrified. I couldn't think straight. Anyway, waiting those tiny moments for the light to turn green, I felt a cold sweat run down my face. And I know it's cliche to say, but waiting, even waiting those tiny milliseconds, it felt like hours. But it wasn't waiting that was the worst part. As I stood there, the scariest part of this whole scenario was the footsteps had stopped. He was right behind me. The light turned green, and the last thing I heard before I booked it across the street all the way home was a deep, hoarse voice. "Hey kid, come, let me show you something."